Hey everybody, welcome to the ranch. This episode is going to be a sad episode. One of my 4 leopard tortoises that you've seen in my videos, Valentine, has passed away. This morning I went to feed all the tortoises, and Valentine was asleep in their water bowl the way some of my tortoises often do sleep there. And when I pulled her out, she was a bit unresponsive. And moving her around and stuff, I realized she's definitely dead. And looking at her belly, the blood had already began to pool. You can see the red marks here. So I knew she'd been dead probably for a few hours. So right now, she's still kind of fresh. Let me tell you a story about where these guys came from. You're looking at a photograph from December 15th, 2016. That's when Valentine and her clutchmates arrived. I had 4 leopard tortoises shipped to me from Texas when I was still in Alaska. I picked them up. They all seemed very healthy. Got them home within a few days. They were eating inside their new enclosure. But what started to happen over the next few months is 2 of the leopards began to grow faster, and 2 of them were kind of stalling, staying behind. And over time, the 2 that were staying behind weren't growing at all. And the other 2 leopards, Contrast and Multiscoot, they were just growing as fast as a healthy tortoise can grow when they're young. So Valentine and Eclipse, they just kind of stalled, and I never knew why. They were eating the amounts that a tortoise their size should eat. They are active, they're moving around, but they just weren't growing. Now, Eclipse is about double her size now. Right now, she weighs in at 72 grams at time of death, whereas Eclipse is about 150, 160 grams. Once he hit the 70, 75 gram mark, he started to grow a little bit faster. Whereas after, these guys were born in November, so we'll say 3 years and 2 months, 2.5 months, this is the total size attained by this tortoise. By comparison, this fatty, this tortoise is Contrast, a clutchmate. Contrast weighs in at just under 2 kilos and is about 9 inches long from front to back. Valentine, however, never really exceeded 3 inches. So you can see there's obviously something not correct with this particular tortoise versus its very healthy and growing clutchmates. After the first year, I made a post on the tortoise forums, and with everybody's experience there, hoping to find something similar, or maybe somebody knew an idea. They say that failure to thrive syndrome, which it can be. Exchanging ideas with everybody, the best guess that anybody came up with was that when it hatched, as soon as a baby tortoise hatches, even though they have their yolk sac, they still eat. They'll eat some of their shell. They'll eat whatever's around them. A lot of time in the wild, the mother poops down there, so there's like already fresh veggies for them to start munching on. When eggs are incubated on perlite, well, that looks just like a shell, so there's no reason for the baby tortoises to not eat them. Perlite, being a styrofoam-like substance, it can get in and coat the digestive system. And that's what we think happened with her. And so, let's say, given her size, maybe her small intestines are 2 inches long. Of that 2 inches, there may be 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch of space to absorb nutrients. And her inability to absorb nutrients has kept her stable at this size, but was never enough to really let her thrive. Now, tapping on her shell is nice and solid, so the nutrients she was getting were sufficient to keep her at this size healthy. And I don't honestly know why she died. She wasn't any slower than normal. She was still eating. It could have just been bad luck. Maybe she inhaled when she was sleeping in her water bowl, which she had never done before. But regardless of how it happened, right now, this is where we're at, with Valentine being 3 years and almost 3 months old and passed away. Now, you see this setup here. I will give a warning now. We are going to do a necropsy on her. I'm going to open her up and see if there's anything blaringly obvious that tells us what was wrong. I would notice sometimes when she'd eat, her skin would puff out. Maybe I'm going to find a hole or perforation somewhere through our digestive tract. I might find signs on the bones of acid wear. You know, if she was outgassing from her stomach the whole time she was alive, who knows? I'm hoping to see something that just jumps out and explains why she was like this the whole time. We're going to pay special attention to our digestive tract. The tools I'm using, I've got this microscope in case we need to get a closer look at stuff. This will be about 50 times magnification. Lighting, of course, gloves, goggles. I have a scalpel and small scissors for some of the finer cuts, and to separate the top shell from bottom shell, I'm going to be using my Dremel tool with a nice new disc on the end of it. From about this point on, if you're squeamish and you don't want to see this, fast forward to the timestamp below. All my viewers know I love sciencing. This is one time I'm not going to love what I have to do, but hopefully it'll give us some answers. All right, before we get started, let me show you what I plan to do. We're going to cut around the edge skin here, around the front, and like this. And we're going to do the same thing in the back. Then we'll take the Dremel and just make a clean cut here and a clean cut here and remove this bottom part. And that's going to open her up so we can see a pretty good bit of what's going on in there. I mentioned the blood pooling. You can see this red staining here. And that's just from her sitting. Blood pools after body dies, and it just kind of tends to go to the lowest point. So it kind of looks like a big bruise. So let's go ahead and get started. As I reviewed the footage of the necropsy, I realized this might be a bit too graphic to show on YouTube. Also, even though I'm a very science-minded person, and I'm certainly not the most emotional person in the world, but this is an animal that I had taken care of for the last 3 years, and it was a little bit more difficult to get through this procedure than I initially anticipated. I fumbled with words, made a couple mistakes when I was pointing things out, just because my mind wasn't in the best place. So I decided to explain what I found while we look at some older footage of Valentine, shortly after this quartet found their home with me up in Alaska. After opening Valentine up, what I found was pretty obvious. In fact, it was pretty obvious because of what I did not find. She appeared to be lacking nearly all of her small intestine. Her digestive tract went directly from her stomach. There was maybe a ½ centimeter's worth of a fold of small intestines, and then directly to her colon. Those of you not too familiar with anatomy and physiology may not understand why that's so significant. When vertebrates eat food, the first stop after we swallow is, of course, our stomach, and the stomach muscles grind and help mush and break down food. Well, the next stop is the small intestines, and that's where the majority of nutrients are pulled out of the food that we eat. With their underdeveloped small intestines, the surface area available to absorb those nutrients was really not sufficient to do much more than just sustain her life. So in essence, even though her stomach was full of food, as was her large intestine, the rest of her body was basically starved for nutrients. And that's why, over the course of 3 years, she didn't even double in size. You might notice that I'm referring to her as she with a lot of conviction. That's because another thing that I found when I opened her up were ovaries full of egg follicles. So to sum all this up, while of course I didn't have to do a necropsy, if I wanted answers, that was pretty much the only way to get them. And it turns out that by no fault of my own nor the fault of the breeder, this tortoise simply had a birth defect that she carried for the last 3 years. It's quite understandable and expected that not every egg and every baby is going to be perfect. And that's why part of the survival strategy of tortoises is to lay numerous eggs. And even though this answered a very long-running question about why she's not growing, this brings up another question. Does Eclipse have a similar birth defect? And if he does, will he ever grow enough surface area in his small intestines to begin absorbing enough nutrients to actually thrive, not just simply survive? I'd like to thank all of you for watching this video and going on this very difficult fact-finding journey with me.
let's all hope that similar journeys aren't required again for a very long time.